Hello, I'm audible. Good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from Population Research Center, Forman Christian College, University, Lahore. My name is Hujra Nasir, and I'm a research assistant at PRC FCCU. Thank you for joining us today on PRC's panel discussion and joint webinar. I would like to welcome all the participants, especially our chief guest, Dr. Jonathan Adderton, Rector, FCCU, Ms. Samia Ali Shah, Project Director, Population Council, Pakistan. I would like to welcome our guest speakers, Dr. Ghulam Muhammad Arif, President, Population Association of Pakistan, Ms. Afia Salam, Member, National Climate Change Council. I would also like to welcome our other guest speakers, Mr. Faisal Fareed. He's from the Provincial Disaster Management Authority, Punjab. Ms. Maria Hassan, Assistant Professor, IBA Karachi. Dr. Muhammad Iqbal, University of Peshawar. And the Mr. Muqtaz Ali, he is District Support Manager, District. I would like to thank our partners, Population Council Pakistan and United Nations Population Fund UNFPA. I would also like to welcome PRC Advisory Board members, PRC departmental representatives, FCCU faculty, staff, and students. The topic of today's event is devastation caused by the 2022 floods in Pakistan and impending challenges and sustainable solutions. This event will start with the panel discussion in which the two national experts will present on their topics, and the session will be concluded approximately by 4:15 p.m. The second session will commence at 4:15 p.m. in which the provincial level experts will be presenting on the devastation and floods in their respective provinces. With these introductory remarks, we will now begin with the recitation of the Holy Quran and the Holy Bible. First of all, I would like to invite Mr. Shuja Waqar for the recitation of the Holy Quran. Mr. Shuja Waqar is the faculty member at the Department of Economics at CCU. So Shuja Waqar, can you please recite the Holy Quran? Thank you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون. Surely we will test you with a bit of fear and hunger and loss in wealth and lives and fruits. So, O Messenger, give the patient people good tidings or news. These are the ones who, when faced suffering, they say, we certainly belong to Allah, and to Him we are bound to return. Those are the ones upon whom there are blessings from their Lord and mercy as well. And those are the ones who are on the right path. Sadaqallahu al-Azim.
Thank you, Sir Shuja Waqar. Now I would like to invite Mr. Baptas George for the recitation of the Holy Bible.
Assalamu alaikum.
गुड आफ्टरनून एवरीवन। हम कलाम मुक़द्दस में से अपनी हिदायत व रहनुमाई के लिए साम 91 की कुछ आयत की तिलावत करेंगे, जिसमें कुछ यूं मरकूम है। तुझ पर कोई आफत नहीं आएगी और कोई वबा तेरे खैमा के नज़दीक ना पहुंचेगी, क्योंकि वो तेरी बाबत अपने फरिश्तों को हुक्म देगा कि तेरी सब राहों में तेरी हिफाजत करें। वो तुझे अपने हाथों पर उठा लेंगे ताकि ऐसा ना हो कि तेरे पाँव को पत्थर से ठेस लगे। तू शेर बब्बर और अफई को रोंदेगा, तू जवान शेर और अजदहा को कमाल करेगा। क्योंकि उसने मुझसे दिल लगाया है, इसलिए मैं उसे छुड़ाऊंगा। मैं उसे सरफराज करूंगा क्योंकि उसने मेरा नाम पहचाना है। वो मुझे पुकारेगा और मैं उसे जवाब दूंगा। मैं मुसीबत में उसके साथ रहूंगा। मैं उसे छुड़ाऊंगा और इज्जत बख्शूंगा। मैं उसे उम्र की दराजी से आसूदा करूंगा और अपनी नजात से उसे दिखाऊंगा, ताकि कलाम का पढ़ा और सुना जाना हम सब के लिए बायस बरकत हो। आमीन।
Thank you, Mr. Gupta, for the recitation of the Holy Quran, and thank you, Sir Shuja Wakar, for the recitation of the for the recitation of the Holy Quran and the Holy Bible. Now, before starting the session, I would like to explain some of the netiquettes for the event. First of all, please rename yourself as your brief institution name, your brief department name, and your full name. Students are requested to mention their roll numbers on their Zoom profiles. And if you face a bandwidth issue, please turn off your video. Every participant will be muted by the host except chief guest speakers, and will be allowed to speak in the Q&A session. Please post your question in the Q&A session in the chat box, or you can also raise your hand. The session is being recorded. Now I would like to invite our chief guest, and it is really an honor for me to invite our respected Dr. Jonathan Adelton, Rector FCCU, for the inaugural address. Dr. Jonathan S. Adelton is the Rector of Forman Christian College, University, Lahore, Pakistan. Born and raised in Pakistan, Dr. Jonathan Adelton is a graduate of Murray Christian College. He has a PhD in International Relations from Tufts University and a BSc in Journalism and Northwestern University, USA. He has also served as USA Ambassador to Mongolia and USAID representative to the European Union. As USAID Mission Director in Islamabad during 2006 to 2007, he headed the USAID-funded reconstruction effort in northern Pakistan following the devastating earthquake there in October 2005. Sir Jonathan Adelton, please honor us with your inaugural address. Thank you.
Thank you, Kizra. Thank you very much. Just wanted to make sure the mute was off here, but I do appreciate it. Just to say a few remarks. It is an honor to be here. It's an interesting subject. It's one that I've followed in terms of disaster relief for much of my career, so I have that special interest too. I guess before we started, though, I did want to give a lot of thanks to UNFPA, the Population Council, and of course the Population Center at FCCU for hosting such events like this. Of course, Dr. Sikander, thank you, Dr. Vikas, others here as well, and certainly the representation from all 4 provinces. It's interesting because this was a disaster that affected all 4 provinces, and so it's very appropriate that representation from all should be there. This, of course, was also the worst disaster, as people say, since that earthquake in 2005 and then the floods that were about 5 years later. So it was truly devastating. And I think on this one, there's been less of an international reaction. People have talked about that more limited reaction. There has been some, and I think it's notable to point that out. But I think nothing compared to both that 2010 flood or especially the earthquake, which really brought people together both in Pakistan and abroad. I think the interesting thing, though, is this time around, much more conscious effort was made to link it to global warming, to link it to climate change, to recognize that these are the long-term impacts that are being played out in really quite difficult ways, during the coming days. And I will say, of course, in the summertime, those of us living in Pakistan, we tracked it, we followed it, we sort of saw what was happening. We saw some of those videos that were being played on the social media, which were quite gripping and quite moving and quite horrifying in different cases. But now, at least in urban Pakistan, it's less on the news, and which isn't to say that there's not consequences being played out in all kinds of ways right now. And in that sense, I think that holding this symposium now is absolutely appropriate because, the dramatic flooded scenes, some of those may be diminishing, although in some places I understand they haven't completely diminished, that there's still flooded areas, but huge sections of Pakistan were underwater, and the impact of that is going to be played out. And I think it's appropriate for us to be talking about that. The activities and the challenges, because the challenges are certainly huge in every way. I guess because there are, I noticed there's more than 60, 65 visitors on right now. people tuning in. I think it is worth saying that there was maybe less of an international reaction, but there was a domestic reaction that was played out in many ways, including on the Forman campus. I just give a shout out to our Rotaract Club, to our Islamic Society, to other groups that raise funds. We ourselves internally tried to raise funds. We also got support from our friends of Forman in the United States. But I think what was also notable about this particular one is some of the individual efforts. And you can, in a development sense, maybe critique them and say, what does an individual do? But the fact of the matter is there were some individual efforts, including by both our faculty and students, that just on their own motivation reached out and maybe gathered some supplies, and in that most dire time tried to be helpful. Of course, again, the passage of time goes on, and there's impact. I do want to say, and again, I'm thinking of the representatives from here, it would be interesting to know the impact on one's own student body. I was talking just very recently to our financial aid office, and they said they had letters from 60 students who normally might have covered their fees or might have covered some of their fees, but because of the devastation of the floods in their home village and their home area, I got a few of these, not 60 of them, but I got a few that came my way about somebody's crop was destroyed, somebody's house was destroyed. And I will say that some of the fundraising we've done on campus is going to go, this is long-term, the devastation of the flood and what happens in the farming, what happens to the next crop. If education is part of it, and you're going through having to pay for your education, that too is one of the long-term impacts, is how do you get together, whether it's at primary or older, or in this case, university, how do you fund it? So that too is one of the long-term impacts to think about. This is one of the occasions, like I said, I had a long time wearing a USAID hat, which did include relief work and reconstruction work. Again, that notable example, Pakistan earthquake in 2005, worked very closely. I noticed that the Punjab the reconstruction relief person is here. At that time, my counterpart was General Nadeem, who then headed the Earthquake Relief and Reconstruction Agency. And my assessment actually is that ERA at the time did a pretty good job. When you hear about things, well, you tend to hear more about the failures and the successes, and the fact you don't hear all that much about ERRA these years later, and indeed even the international aid effort, because I think that despite the challenges, I think that they did rise to the occasion and did have a positive impact. It'll be interesting this time around, as you shift from the immediate humanitarian relief to the broader reconstruction. At that time, the slogan was "Build Back Better." It'll be interesting to see how the relief effort or the reconstruction works. And, we'll be following that closely. I'll leave it at that because, again, the experts are about to come on, but just to express appreciation for our ability to host this, but also for all the attendees that are going to be part of this conversation too. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Edelton, for honoring us and for joining us on today's event. Now I would like to invite Dr. Waqas Ali for the welcome address. Dr. Muhammad Waqas Ali has a PhD in criminal justice from Michigan State University. Previously, he has taught at the University of Punjab, UMD, Lum's University of Sargodha, Lahore campus, and the Pakistan College of Law. He has been a visiting lecturer at the Civil Services Academy, and he has worked as a consultant in 2 projects for country study, Pakistan, Nepal, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, of children working in wetlands and children working in 12 hazardous sectors of Punjab. Both were the collaborations between the International Labour Organization and the Center of Improvement of Working Conditions and Environment, Punjab. I would now like to request Dr. Waqas to please deliver his welcome address.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome everyone. It is my distinct honor to welcome our esteemed speakers, especially Dr. Edelton, Madam Samia from the Population Council, Dr. G.M. Arif, and Ms. Afia Salam. Our worthy guests who have joined us from all over Pakistan. I would like to especially acknowledge our partners, the Population Council, the UNFPA, the PRC at the universities of Peshawar, BUITEMS, IEBA in making this event possible. I am delivering this welcome address on behalf of Dr. Sikandar, who could not join us due to his health, we all pray for his quick recovery. The topic of today's webinar is the devastation caused by 2022 floods in Pakistan and impending challenges and suitable solutions. It is a it is a topic of grave and continuing importance for Pakistan. FCCU is honored to host this event, as this is the first collaborative event organized by the 4 PRC. I will now present a brief overview of the destruction caused by the floods, raise some important questions to set up this discussion. There are a lot of facts, so please excuse me that to serve memory, I will read those from paper. According to the Global Climate Risk Index, Pakistan is the 8th most vulnerable nation to climate change in the world. The recent floods in 2022 represent the 4th major flood in Pakistan, which Pakistan has faced in the last 3 decades, including 1992 floods, 93 floods, and 2010 floods. However, compared to the previous floods, the destructions caused by the 2022 flood is unprecedented. In terms of scale, the monetary damage caused by the 2022 floods stands at an estimated $18 billion, which is almost twice the monetary damage caused by the 2010 floods, which was around $10 billion. 1/3 of the territory of the Pakistan was submerged. A total of 33 million people were affected. Southern and central Pakistan has been most affected, particularly the Balochistan and Sindh provinces. Balochistan received 5.1 times its 30-year average rainfall as of August 22, while Sindh's average rainfall is 5.7 times its 30-year average. According to NDMA, more than 2 million houses are affected, out of which nearly 7,600,000 houses have been destroyed, while 1.3 million have been damaged. The floods have also ravaged public infrastructure. Nearly 13,000 kilometers of roads have been damaged or destroyed, and around 410 bridges have collapsed. 40% of the damaged roads were located in Sindh, followed by 24% in KPK, 22% in Balochistan, and 16% in Punjab. The resulting number of human fatalities and injuries was simply enormous. 1,700 people lost their lives due to the floods. More than half of these were women and children. A total of 12,800 people were injured, out of which 27% were women and 31% were children. An estimated 4% of the disaster-affected population is pregnant, and an estimated 15% of these are likely to experience pregnancy-related complications. According to United Nations High Commission for Refugees, over 800,000 refugees live in districts notified as calamity hit by the government of Pakistan. This includes 200,000 people in the Peshawar district in KPK, 170,000 people in Quetta, Balochistan, 77,000 people in Nowshera Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and 71,500 people in Karachi. As a result of the floods, over 3.5 million children have been deprived of education. As the data indicates that more than 22,000 in Sindh, Balochistan, Punjab, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and over 5,500 schools are currently housing refugees. Over 1,500 health facilities have been affected by the rainfall and the floods. The health sector reports that access to health facilities, healthcare workers, and essential medicines, medical supplies remains limited. Early disease surveillance indicates that tens of thousands of people have been affected by diarrhea, malaria, acute respiratory infections, skin and eye infections, and typhoid. Initial reports have been received of the rise in dengue cases in refugee villages Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, while an outbreak of acute watery diarrhea has reportedly affected 45 districts all across Pakistan. The ravages of the floods have also debilitated the agriculture and livestock sector, which was a major source of sustenance in the affected areas. Over 1.2 million hectares of agricultural land in Sindh have been damaged, while 61% of livestock keepers in the affected districts in Balochistan have already reported symptoms of transboundary animal diseases in their livestock assets. NDMA reports indicate that around 500,000 livestock have been lost due to rains and floods. The loss of arable land and livestock will not only deprive thousands of households of income and sustenance in the flood-affected areas, but its tremors will be felt across the country. As food insecurity is likely to rise, inflation rates are likely to soar. The trade deficit is likely to increase in 2023. In the agriculture sector alone, rice, cotton, and sugarcane together faced a direct loss of almost 1.3 billion United States dollars. Trade deficit is estimated to rise up to $4 billion this year, and the additional impact of the current account deficit is also estimated in the range of $4 to $5 billion. The government of Pakistan, the provincial government agencies, local and international NGOs, and volunteer groups have been actively playing their part to help flood-affected people by providing shelter and relief packages and cash compensations. However, Pakistan's faltering economy simply lacks the funds needed to implement a comprehensive and cohesive nationwide flood relief and rehabilitation strategy, which will inevitably exacerbate the country's already existing dependency on foreign aid and foreign capital. According to the revised flood response plan of 2022 and 2023, to overcome the damage caused by the floods of 2022, Pakistan would require foreign funding in the neighborhood of $500 million in 2022 and $3.5 million in 2023. In dealing with the aftermath of the 2022 floods, we must also contend with the evident threat of floods in the future. Rising sea levels, changing rainfall patterns are expected to make floods more frequent and intense over the coming decades. Furthermore, Pakistan has the 5th highest population growth rate in the world. As the population increases, so does the risk of rural settlement and urban expansion into areas that are at high risk of flooding. Therefore, a long-term strategy of slowing population growth should be pursued in parallel with flood risk prevention strategies and climate action initiatives. In the past years, the state has been working towards developing a comprehensive policy framework for disaster risk management, disaster risk prevention, climate action, and population control. However, policy implementation is still very limited. Despite these policies and laws, there is a lack of coordination between institutions responsible for disaster management and the reduction and population management and the academia. Despite the fact that the universities, research organization, and scientific communities are consistently working on these issues. A synergy between the two can lead to development of both and it can lead to more practical policies and their implementation. In this regard, the Population Research Center at Forman College, in collaboration with Population Council and the Population Research Centers at IBA, University of Peshawar, and BUITEMS, has arranged this joint webinar. We are indeed fortunate that we have been able to gather national and provincial level experts from the 4 provinces to understand the devastation caused by the floods at the national and provincial level, and to discuss relief and rehabilitation activities and imminent challenges in the coming years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Waqas, for such an informative welcome note. Now I would like to invite Ms. Samia Ali Shah from the Population Council for her welcome note. Ms. Samia Ali Shah is the Project Director at the Population Council Islamabad, where she has been working for over 4 years now. As a former civil servant, Ms. Shah has worked with the government of Pakistan and then moved to the development sector, where she has worked for several years now and developed a vast experience in the field of communications and advocacy. Ms. Samia Ali Shah, if you could please give your welcome note.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Edelton, Rector, FCC University, directors of the 4 population research centers, honorable guest speakers and participants. I would like to thank all of you for being here and of course for organizing this first joint webinar by the 4 population research centers in Pakistan. Dr. Zeba has asked me to express her profound apologies and regret that due to a last minute sort of call from KP, she had to go for an official meeting, and but she hopes that in future, inshallah, she will join any such other activity that these PRCs would be organizing. I will not, obviously cannot, speak of things that Dr. Zeba would say, but I would certainly like to say that Population Council is very proud of its association with the population research centers. It has been a collaborative effort supported by UNFPA, but really, with the FCC University, BUITEMS, IBA, and Peshawar University, this collaboration has resulted in very important setting up of this institutions, which we hope would revive the trend of demographic research and really training of new demographers in Pakistan. So really congratulations to all the 4 PRCs for having arranged this, and special thanks, of course, Dr. Waqas for leading this whole initiative. I think Dr. Edelton and Professor Waqas have already touched upon the key issues that will be discussed today at this webinar. But I would really like to sort of highlight just a couple of points. A population, when there's these, there's floods on steroids, or rather monsoons on steroids occurred, and the flooding, Population Council carried out sort of analysis of based on PDHS and census data, estimations of vulnerable populations in the most affected districts of population. And the profile that emerged is very, what should I say? It's again, somehow we know that this climate change is not a doing of Pakistan. We are one of the most vulnerable countries, but we are the least contributors to carbon emissions in the world. So really, in that sense, while the consumption patterns of developed countries are affecting the climate change in developing countries like Pakistan, it is yet again the poorest section of countries like Pakistan which get affected by far, more than any other. So the sort of the profile that emerged from that data analysis was that most of the vulnerable population which has been affected lives in rural population. Number 2, they are mostly in what you call the poverty zones identified in all the 4 provinces. They are poor. They live in kacha houses, which were either destroyed or damaged. And because they are poor, their ability to rebuild those structures gets compromised. And then they're rural, poor, and then mostly women. And among women, they're more vulnerable are the pregnant women. And it's quite interesting to note that the most women affected in the worst districts were women who had the highest unmet need and had at least 5 children already. And some of them gave birth. We've heard all those sort of harrowing stories of women giving birth literally on the streets, not even on the streets, like in trucks during the flood. So I think a very important point that the linkage between climate change and population comes in when you talk about adaptation and resilience. We need to build adaptation and resilience ability of our population. And I think Dr. Waqas just touched upon it, that this rapid population basically is affecting our overall human development indicators. So sustainable population has to be one of the key factors to because will be affected by climate change. We need to manage it, and family planning has to be considered has to be built in the resilience and adaptation strategies being developed for disaster management. So that is how this linkage between population and climate change is very important, and family planning needs to be understood as a tool for mitigating the vulnerabilities of the impacts that climate change is having in Pakistan. So this is sort of just a little perspective, just to put things, since we are Population Council, and this webinar is by Population Research Centers. The population is really the key denominator here, which needs to be looked at and configured when you talk about climate change, resilience, and adaptation. So I'm really looking forward to listening to all the experts and I'm sure it will be interesting in finding. My best wishes to Sir Sikandar. I've been his student, so I hope he gets well soon. And with that, I'll thank all of you, and I'm very much looking forward to hear from all the experts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Samia. Thank you so much for your kind words. Now I would like to request Ms. Sayyida Zain Fatma Shamsi to please invite our guest speakers for our first session. Ms. Zain Fatma, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Khizra. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sayyida Zain Fatma Shamsi. We will now proceed towards a panel talk session in which our national level experts will be presenting. First, I would like to invite Dr. Ghulam Muhammad Arif. Ghulam Muhammad Arif is the president of Population Association of Pakistan. He has completed his PhD and MA degree from Australian National University, Canberra, in the subject of demography. He is a former joint director of Pakistan Institute of Development Economics. He has also served as a dean of research, senior research demographer, staff economist, associate staff economist, and research associate at Pakistan Institute of Development Economics. He will talk on floods in Pakistan, significance of population in framing national disaster management and resilience policies. Sir, I would request you to please present your talk. Sir Ghulam Muhammad Arif sir.
Assalamu alaikum ji. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Can you show the slides?
Yes, sir. I'll share it right now.
Let me start. Dr. Jonathan, Dr. Waqar, Dr. Afia Salam, and our colleagues from all four PRCs and students, Assalamu alaikum. I'm really thankful to PRCs, particularly FCCU, PRC, and Population Council for giving this opportunity to share my views on this population and mainly on resilience policies. I must say in the beginning that really I'm not any expert in the climate change, and it has not been my area of research during last 4 decades. But I did some work in the past on resilience and linked disaster with some sort of adaptation strategies in Pakistan. I think Dr. Waqar and then Saima Shah and also Dr. Edelton, they have given a good background. I don't need to go into detail of all these things. And my discussion will be mainly on resilience. Population will be the main thing, and about the resilience policies or how can we, you can say, make people and communities stronger to resist the risk like flood 2022. Next, please. I would like to skip this one. I think most of these things have been stated earlier, except just a couple of points here that according to the Population Council estimate, 39 districts are severely affected by the flood. 16 are in Sindh and 17 in Balochistan. Only three in Punjab and KP. And I think other issues about poverty and just one thing more addition to these profile, or you can say the effect. If you have gone through the dawn yesterday, there was about issue of hunger as well. That because of this COVID-19 and this flood situation, there's a danger of not only poverty, but hunger as well. It means we are facing a lot of challenges in terms of loss of agriculture, livestock, poverty, food insecurity, hunger, and damage of houses as well. Next, please. I think this I tried to I think we have said this one. Dr. Wakar has very nicely described these most of these things. Please, next one. Impact this has on. What are the important factors that turn the hazard into a disaster? I think it is a 4 point I have noted down here, and these 4 points have also been stated briefly by our earlier speakers. One issue is the climate change, like the heavy monsoon. They have badly affected the whole social and economic things in Pakistan. And the other is the mismanagement of water resources and natural drainage system and inadequate or non-existent early warning system in Sindh and Balochistan. That we can put it as a one factor. And the other factor, Dr. Wakar and Ms. Shah, they both have also pointed it out, is the exponential increase in population in Pakistan. It is not population itself may not be the key factor, but the many things which are associated with the population growth and high population, they have affected the whole, you can say, our system that has been very prone to the floods in terms of housing settlements and the many other things which you can think that are associated with high population growth. And growth of cities and towns, I think it has been also given a reason for this high flood. And also the you can say how the different rural communities live in rural areas, particularly in river basins. They have also been shown as one of the factor for this whole flood. It is not only just that we have a heavy monsoon, but you can say the bad governance on the government side and negligence in terms of managing the water resources, and also then social factors, particularly high population growth, our urbanization, and also the settlement pattern in rural areas. They all have one way or other contributed in this disaster which we have faced just 2-3 months back. Next, please. Now, the resilience, the ultimate and desirable outcome of flood risk management is the resilience. If you see, go through the literature, I have picked up here 2 definitions of flood resilience systems. We'll go through this quickly. The first one is that the flood resilience system has in place when the capacity to resist, which shows the capacity to resist floods, and particularly flood defenses, and capacity to absorb and recover from floods, and the capacity to adapt and transform. So these are the, when you have a resistance capacity and absorbing capacity and also adaptation and also taking the opportunities, as Dr. Edelton has said in his remarks, then we can say that the system is resilient and the population and also the people have the capacity to face this risk and minimize the damage that come from this any risk. Next, please. And the other is, which is I think the base for my discussion for today, it is the community flood resilience framework. And this framework is based on 5 capitals: financial capital, human capital, natural capital, physical capital, and social capital. I think what this whole framework tells us that these 5 forms of capital demonstrate the capacity for communities to avoid the creation of new risks, reduce existing risks, prepare for future risks, and improve their response toward recovery from a flood event. So basically what this framework is, that it is not only just addressing one thing or other, that if you want to make the, to develop the system, then our communities should be flood resilient. And for this flood resilience, then communities and the people of that communities, they have these 5 type of capitals: financial, human, natural, physical, and social. I think it's not time to go into more detail, but I think students and other colleagues who have some interest, they can find many things in the literature on these lines. Next, please. Briefly about the international experience, just considering these definition of resilience. Netherlands is a good example you can find in the literature in terms of flood defenses or avoiding the flood risk. Netherlands has a good system. England is quite important in terms of the spatial planning. And Bangladesh example is given for a good early warning system and quick evacuation of the people. And in Indonesia, the governance, or you can say the legal part, is quite strong in Indonesia. But I think after looking to these experiences, it is also common to find in the literature that there is no concrete one-size-fits-all solution for achieving flood resilience. That is not any framework anywhere that we can pick that framework and apply on the situation of Pakistan. Rather, the advice is that the governance strategies or the resilience strategies should be specified and tailored to physical circumstances as well as institutional and social context. It means like what we have faced, it is unique in our way, and we need to develop our strategies and the resilient system to avoid these type of disaster in future. Next, please. But unfortunately, you may have seen this Washington Post report that has shown through the UN report that the Pakistan has a narrow window to boost climate resilience. That may be one of the reasons that Pakistan is very actively looking for international support. I think it is a debatable things that the how much we can depend on the international community without you can say strengthening our own system and our own people and developing their capacity to resist these type of disasters in the future. Anyhow, the common perception is that the window of opportunity for Pakistan is quite narrow. Next, please. More need to be done at the community level. I think after looking to the literature during last, you can say 3-4 days, what I have searched the literature, the main message is that we need to do something more at the community level. And when we talk about the community level, then we also talk about the people and also the population. Then it means that unless we developed some strategies to enhance the capacity of communities and the people. It would be difficult just to get support international or maybe from the region, and we can expect that the situation in Pakistan will improve. We need to do more for at the community level. Next, please. Here, two things are important at the community level. First is the restructure the local governance. And unfortunately, you can see that the local governments are very weak in Pakistan. And what we have experienced in Sindh and Balochistan, without strong local governments, it may not be possible to build safe havens and manage to avoid this disaster and vulnerability. And also the community level organizations at the grassroots level, they are very important for this whole community level efforts at community level development. Next, please. The main thing, I think, what I can say based on these 5 capitals, which we have discussed earlier briefly, that Pakistan need to increase the resilience of people. And what is the resilience of people? How can we increase this one? Just go to the discussion of Dr. Waqas and Dr. Dalton and also Sema Shah. Then it is the reducing poverty, improving basic education and health facilities, raising awareness, and providing them more opportunities of work and upward mobility, and building climate-proof housing which can withstand the impacts of natural disaster. And we can fit these things on these 5 capitals which we have discussed earlier. That it means a holistic approach, focusing on the population and looking at the major problems which these populations are facing. We can make the people resilient, and they, I think, can address the issues at the local level. Next, please. And also one thing is very much linked in the literature is that they also develop the resilience of cities, towns, and villages. This resilience is mainly goes to the natural capital, which is part of the 5 capitals which we have discussed. It means that our infrastructure should be compatible with the natural, does not hamper the natural flow of rivers and hill torrents. We should live with the nature. But we have seen many things. Even in Islamabad, there was a death of a couple of people during this monsoon, and one of the reason was that in one sector houses was built on the old nala, you can say. That was the way of the water channel. But our housing pattern has even affected the Islamabad population in one sector, and we have seen death of I think it was a child and a woman. So that is the also on the one hand resilience is for the people and making communities strong and addressing the economic, social, and demographic issues and population, and other hand also developing and strengthening the natural capital. Next, please. And this is my second last slide. That based on my research, I did research on migration for last 30-40 years, including I remember I read very keenly the book written by Dr. Dalton when I was doing my PhD. That they encourage mobility in Sindh and Balochistan. It is not time, but if you, I have written in somewhere that the migration is a basically way of enhancing the adaptive capacity of household. And this is very common way in KP, Central Punjab, and also mountainous areas of Pakistan, but not in Sindh and Balochistan. This climate change induced migration may happen in Sindh and Balochistan, but we need to to make these provinces more mobile, and mobility should be increased there. This morning I was in a seminar organized by the NIPS, and where I think this international migration, they were showing how the participation from Sindh and Balochistan is quite low. We need to look at this one, and I have given several times recommendations to the Ministry of Manpower to develop some more offices in Sindh and Balochistan, so that people can have opportunity to move to cities and also to go abroad and to improve their well-being. Next, please. And finally, I can conclude by saying that when I was preparing this today, my presentation, yesterday I saw the article written by former Finance Minister Dr. Miftah Ismail, and who has given 6 factors for economic growth and poverty reduction. And when I thought these things, I just modified that one little bit, and to say that if we can follow these lines, then not only it will help in sustained economic growth, it will reduce poverty, but will also make the population more resilient. The first one is related to the climate change and water management, then controlling high population growth, empowering local governments, starting from Union Council and going to the metropolitan level. Live within means. Live within means that international support we need, but we need to depend on our own resources more. Enhance agriculture productivity and improve education and health facility. We can add here that also encourage mobility in Sindh and Balochistan. With these factors, I hope that the population can be part of the climate change and resilience agenda, while we can manage or we can avoid these type of disasters. We can avoid these type of disasters in the future. Thank you very much for this opportunity and listening to me.
Thank you, Dr. Ghulam Muhammad Arif, for your presentation. Our next speaker is Ms. Afia Salam. She's a member of National Climate Change Council. Ms. Afia Salam has a master's in geography and is a career journalist having 4 decades of experience of print, electronic, and web journalism. She's a lead FNF's International Academy of Leadership and Australia Award Fellow, member of IUCN Commission on Education and Communication and Commission on Economic and Social Policy. She is also a member of the National Coordinating Body for Marine Protected Areas. She has been highlighting issues related to environment and climate change through her writings and advocacy through seminars and moderation of panel discussions and roundtables. She is also a development practitioner and current elected president of Ban Bailey and chair board of trustees Indus Earth Trust. She is also the member of National Climate Change Council. Ms. Afia Salam will talk on population climate change nexus. Ms. Afia, I would request you to please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you very much, and I'm honored to have been asked, to be a part of this seminar. And there's such important things that everybody has already discussed that I feel a lot of things that I have mentioned have already been said. So I will try to skip over them because I don't want to be repetitive. It's just that I just wanted to obviously thank the Population Council for giving my name as one of the representatives who will speak at this. There is a glitch in my Zoom, and my video will keep getting stuck, so I'll keep trying to fix it. Otherwise, if it gives me too many problems, then I will just put it off. So the topic that was assigned was floods in Pakistan, DRM, disaster risk management, and DRR. But when you see, when we move along the slides, you will see I have sort of flipped the order, because I think not enough is said for disaster risk reduction. And that is why we find ourselves coping with such huge damages after a disaster hits us, that risk management sometimes just slips way down, by the wayside. So if you can go on the next slide. I would also like to compliment on the very exhaustively put together concept note for this event. And because that had already covered so many things, so I've not gone into the science, into the figures, into the statistics. And I just want to talk about certain issues which will be like bullet points on which I will be elaborating. So this has already been mentioned, but what is important to note is that Pakistan has never really slipped out of the top 10 bracket over the last decade and a half. So it's been this long that we have known the threat level for Pakistan. But if you see across the board, is there a corresponding conversation within our society, within our academia, within our the governance tiers, within the media? So unfortunately, the answer is a resounding no, because a country which is in the top 10 bracket should have been, doing a lot more, talking a lot more about the kind of threats they face and taking action at a much higher level and with greater acceleration and with a greater sense of urgency, which has not been apparent. And I mean, you can just look around what we have been hit by this time, and you can tell that we had not been prepared. So it is actually the lack of preparedness. This is why I wanted to focus on disaster risk reduction, because we do talk a lot about disaster management, but management should not have to be done if we reduce the risks earlier, or there can even be only a minimal need for management if we have taken the necessary steps to reduce the risks. Next slide, please. So, I mean, I will just skim through this, but there are some points that I want to make. The climate change threats, yes, I know that the topic assigned was focusing on the floods 2022. But if you look at it, there are different other threats that Pakistan faces. If we are number 8 on the threat index, that means there are 7 countries which are more highly vulnerable than Pakistan. But we must remember that those countries which are above us in the scale are single threat countries. Bangladesh is threatened with sea level rise. The small island nations which are higher than us are also threatened with sea level rise, and there are predictions of their being completely wiped off the face of the earth. But we are a multi-threat country, and multi-threat, the different threats that we face are the glacial melt because of the rise in temperature. And this is very important to keep in mind, because this impacts not just the glaciers, but it also impacts the glacial melt that swells our rivers, like the Sawat destruction you saw this time, and also in 2010. And this temperature rise is giving, is heating up Pakistan. Pakistan's temperature has risen from the historic norm by 1.5 degrees already. And there are predictions that this is going to go higher. And just before these floods, so I know that we are focusing on floods, but anybody who's done, I mean, it is taught even in schools, the basic cycle, the water cycle. There was intense heat just before the floods. In May and June, we actually lost a season in 2022, because immediately after the winter came summer, we did not have spring. And because the summer was also an intensely hot summer, we are a country with very large water bodies. We have the world's largest dams. We have a contiguous irrigation system. So that presents itself with a lot of water exposed. We've got some very large lakes. So while it makes for very good optics when we put it in tourism books and in school books, oh, we have the world's largest dam, then we have those largest dams are actually the places from where the water vapor is rising up into the atmosphere. And if it is going up, it obviously is going to come down somewhere. And the large volume that has been sucked up is going to come down in more than normal rainfall. The double jeopardy was when this more than normal rainfall actually fell in 8 different geographical locations. Balochistan has never been an area of monsoons, neither has southern Punjab, Rojhan, and Koh-e-Sulaiman, that area would receive, a very, very monsoon system dying out. But this time, two systems collided, and that is where most of the rain fell. And this is why I think it is very important to understand the distinction between the floods that we are comparing our previous floods to. This year, there was no flood in the Indus River. We did not have a riverine flood. We had an alluvial flood, which came from the hill torrents in Balochistan, as well as in South Punjab. The rain in the Kohe Suleiman came down the Rodkoi, and the hill torrents of Balochistan, they came down the path, which is the path of the water. It had been dry for a while. So, that is where the intervention of climate change in the 2022 floods end. It has nothing else was due to the climate change. The disaster, the deaths, the destruction, the infrastructure damage, the livestock losses, and the life losses were because we were sitting in the path of those rivers. And obviously, the wrath of nature is something that you cannot withstand. Humans can't. They can if they make, preparedness again, and that is something that I would like to focus on, the disaster or lack of preparedness that we have displayed. Because had the road networks the adequate culverts under them, they would not have been washed away. Had the dams, so many dams in Balochistan have been wiped out. At those dams, that means that there was something wrong with the quality of construction. That again is a human element. That is nothing to do with nature or with climate. So the poor quality of construction, the poor engineering, all those things combined to exacerbate the damage, which was done because we had settlements in the path of the rivers, in the waterways, in the catchment areas, in the basin. And this is something that has happened over and over again. In 2010, when we had the floods in the river, the damage was done because of the obstructions in the river, which included the structures, infrastructure, the settlements, the Bachao Band and things that we put in its path, the different, we even have revenue villages, we have transmission towers, we have roads running through the riverbed. And the riverbed obviously swells when the water comes, and it shrinks to a smaller size. And then when it shrinks to a smaller size, people think that that is okay for them to go and encroach on it and live in it. Now, floods are something that we are an agrarian country. And across the world, if you look at the great civilizations that have been nurtured by rivers, the people living alongside rivers actually pray for floods. Floods are what bring prosperity, they bring, fertility. But if we are sitting, living in sync with nature, what those people do, they used to take the benefit of the floods. They used to grow the crops, harvest them before the time of the waters just gushing down. So this is what we have not done. Now, glacial melt also is a natural phenomenon. Glacial melt is happening because of the temperature rise. These 2 points are connected to each other, but we are exacerbating it by the human activity enhancement in those very, very fragile ecological areas. There's a lot of construction going on over there. There's a lot of heavy traffic that is passing there, which is speeding up the rise of the glaciers. And then we have these global events, which are glacial lake outburst floods, which not just wash away your infrastructure as they did this time, they also take away the arable and cultivable land, because there's very little land available in Gilgit-Baltistan or even in Chitral and well, maybe in Swat too, a little more in Swat, they have a lot more land. But if we start encroaching upon nature, we cannot withstand its force when it strikes back. In Sindh, we have the phenomenon of sea intrusion, which is like a trailer to the sea level rise, which will happen due to the global warming and the melting of the polar ice caps. And sea intrusion is already happening because of lack of fresh water being allowed to come downstream Kotri. So it doesn't flush the creeks, which were the riverine creeks. And now the seawater has intruded and it has, completely laid to waste thousands and thousands of acres of riverine forest, riverine agricultural land, and it has turned the subsoil water bracket. So we have also lost the arable land over there. Desertification, obviously, because we are losing the land, it is also putting into action the strong winds, which is taking away the topsoil. And that is something that is rendering, that is actually going to impact our food security. Urban heat, we have already experienced in Karachi 2015, when in 3 days, we had more than 1,500 people who died just because of the heat. And, this is not a natural phenomenon. We built Karachi, it's a concrete jungle. There's very little green cover. And this is happening to our other cities where this rampant construction is taking place and denuding the natural environment. So then, we pay the price. So are we ready for this? I don't think so. So next slide, please. So these are the implications we have already seen. The numbers have already been given by the worthy speakers who spoke before me, as well as they are there in the concept note, and they are being updated daily. You have this weekly update SITREP from UNOCHA as well as NDMA. You can get provincial figures, you can get figures against all of these points. So infrastructure damage, loss of habitat. Now, I know the gentleman before me, he spoke about migration. Migration, actually, yes, Sindh has always had it because that's an economic migration. People move from from Tharparkar and other areas to what they call the Baraji areas, where cultivation is being done. And then they go at the time of harvest, because that's a source of livelihood. And they are also able to bring back the grains to last them till the next crop cycle. But migration is not as simple, and it is not always positive. I just spoke about sea intrusion. There are people who've had to migrate out of Indus Delta. It was a thriving and a very prosperous community used to reside over there. They used to have these big game reserves. They used to be traders of red rice, pre-partition. There used to be these big boats that used to take them down to the coast to Surat. They would trade in fruit and dates and bananas and red rice and even grapes. And now only 150,000 people are living there, and they are also struggling to survive. They are in the bind of crushing poverty over there, because those who were agrarian farmers have now become daily wage workers. And those who were the fisher folk, now they see the species loss, because the species cannot bear the kind of salinity and the change in their particular habitat. And also because the land is being eaten away by the sea. So there is no place for them to go back to. So, the migration in the climate-induced migration is something different, and we must make that distinction. And the economic migration or seasonal migration, as has been a norm in Sindh for decades, needs to be seen in a different context. And when this migration happens where a community cannot go back to the place it actually belonged to, it is going to a place where resources are available. And those resources are already being used by a community which is native to that. Then obviously there is a resource competition. There is also social strife, because nobody wants anybody from outside, as you say, to come and take their resources, because even those communities are not very rich communities. They're also just making do. So all these issues are, a threat to the stability, social stability. Next, please. Now, these also are implications of disasters like floods. There's, of course, an increase in poverty. And what is interesting is that nobody is looking at the situation of the people who were not below the poverty line, but who have now gone below the poverty line, but they are not within any existing list of people who were provided some assistance through the Benazir Income Support Program, which was renamed as SAS. So they are nowhere. So they are in the worst situation because those who are at the bottom of the pyramid, they have been registered and they have received some cash transfers, but people who were just okay, not very well off, but who probably owned a house of their own, nothing palatial, just a 2-room house, but it was their own. And that house has been completely demolished. So they have nothing. They do not have any recourse to any kind of monetary help or any other help that the government or any other agencies may offer. So we have to also look at bringing them into that mainstream of the registration or the mainstreaming them over there, so they are able to at least put their lives back in order. But these things are happening as a result of an increase in poverty, that more children are out of school. There are more girl brides, we know that. Because of the less nutrition available, there's neonatal births are there, and then the low birth weight babies are being born. The mother's health is already compromised. The multiple births have already compromised their situation. And this increases the vulnerability of a large segment of the population, because we know the growing instances of not just malnutrition, but stunting. And stunting which is irreversible. And stunting which has actually been, it is being looked at that there is fetal stunting because of the contaminated water that the mother is drinking. So anybody who, and we also know that stunting is irreversible. So it's not as if once the child is born and you feed them a highly nutritious diet, they will become okay. No, they remain stunted. So while we sort of glorify our youth bulge and 60% population is of youth, what kind of youth are we going to produce if we do not take care of the most vulnerable of our population, which are these children and which are these mothers who are giving birth to low birth weight babies and who are malnourished and stunted throughout their life? So we must look at that. Then in the there is a definite decrease in the resilience and adaptive capacity, because of the large outlay of resources needed to provide that. Even in the 2022 floods, the numbers are mind-boggling, and even the international community is, there's donor fatigue setting in already, because they do not have that kind of capacity to keep giving to Pakistan after every few years. If we keep making the same mistakes and we keep building settlements in the pathway of the rivers like we did in, if you just look at the images of Sawat that came out in 2010, and this time when that hotel just collapsed like a house of cards. So that doesn't really build any donor confidence. So we must set our own house in order. Mental health issues, even at the best of times, in the best of the social setup in the segments, are not paid attention to. But these kind of disasters scar people for life. Children, we've met children in camps who are scared of the sound of gushing water. Will they be able to get out of that fear? How will they be able to cope with growing up if they have to go back, if they are from the fishing community, if they have to go back living on the water or near the water? So how will that childhood trauma impact their functionality? And of course, there's less access to health and education facilities. And here again, if you look at it with the gender lens on, so the first segment of population that falls by the wayside whenever there's a resource constraint are the women, are the girls. Because if a person is falling below the poverty line, and if they can afford to send children to school, only some children to school, they'll probably send their sons and not their daughters. So we must wear the gender lens also when we look at disasters. Next, I'll quickly speed up. So as far as risk reduction is concerned, what do we need to do? We need long-term climate modeling. Right now, yes, we have an excellent Met department. They're very capable people, and their capacity with the scientific instrument has been increased. But what are our universities doing? I'm speaking to an audience right now with students. How many students are going into the science of climate modeling, long-term modeling for a country that is as threatened as us? These are the subjects that our academia needs to focus on. So vulnerability mapping is essential if we are going now into the phase of reconstruction and rehabilitation. And I know it's a very difficult choice, because we want to help the people who've been out in the open for so many months now. The rain started in well, in the north, they started just after May, but in Balochistan and Sindh, the disasters hit us in July and August. But we are in December now, and people are still sitting on the roadsides around with the open or maybe just a sheet of plastic over their head. But if we allow them to go back and live in the same zone, which is now a disaster, we know it is a disaster zone. Earlier, we only thought of the river Indus and its tributaries. Now we know that even the torrents coming from Koh Suleiman can be as deadly. In fact, they're proven to be more deadly. So we cannot allow them to go there. But it's very easy, and it seems very, very sort of dictatorial to say you cannot be allowed to go and live there. But then where else to go? You cannot just throw them away from that area without making adequate, adequate provision for giving them a life of dignity in the alternate place. There needs to be options of livelihood. There needs to be everything else that my earlier speaker, colleagues had mentioned, that health facilities and educational facilities and safe havens. Where are the safe havens? So all these things are very, very important. And we need to have these multi-sectoral committees of disaster responders, because this time we saw that the response was so late because the government organization that had been put in place, that had been formed and that had been provided the resources, they were very slow to respond. It were the local people, local philanthropists, students, social workers who were the first responders. And this is why it is important to allow these organizations and these bodies and informal segments of population to function, because they know the people, they know the community, they know their needs, and they know how to take care of them. Rather than any outsider coming with a top-down solution or just throwing some ration packs at them, that is not a solution. It hasn't worked, it won't work ever again. Next step, next slide, sorry. So these are just some of the things that I'm going to, because every place which comes up in the vulnerability mapping that I have mentioned in my earlier slide, once we have got the vulnerability mapping done and we have relocated people out of those hazardous areas, all the other areas, because one thing, please remember, in the context of climate change, unless and until we have those long-term climate models, we keep getting hit by the unpredictability, the element of unpredictability in climate change. Everybody was thinking, okay, if the flood comes, River Indus, we will do this, we will move here, we will move up on the embankments. It didn't flood. River Indus did not flood. The highest highest volume of water that passed the Indus River into the sea was 6 lakh cusecs, whereas in 2010 we were worried about the 12 lakh cusecs, maybe compromising the integrity of Sakhar Barat. So we must remember that these things have to be done, and there need to be drills. What I've mentioned in the last point over here with the GLOF model. So Pakistan has implemented GLOF 1 in Gilgit-Baltistan as well as in Chitral. And now, as we speak, the GLOF 2 with the help of UNDP through the Green Climate Fund is being implemented. And over there, that entire model needs to be picked up and implemented in all the vulnerable areas of the country, where there are designated safe spaces with stockpile of supplies like tents and dry rations and blankets and medicines. And the community drills are happening continuously, so they know how to reach those areas in time of disasters. Next. Next slide. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Somebody asked me whether it's mute, so I don't think I'm mute.
Okay.
Okay.
We are trying to move it.
Okay. So survival skills training is a must. Half the country's population does not know how to swim. And we are a flood-prone country. Then they need also these survival skills where they should know how to, tie tubes and drums on things and just float away to a safe space. They need to know how to save their, save their documents, their property documents, their identity documents, because ultimately when they lose these, they lose any right to claim for any kind of help. And the use of essential items like, batteries, they need to have charged cell phones. We have the highest tele density. So that's one way actually we got to know of the disaster. We didn't know or get to know about it from official sources or the media. It were the people who had cell phones and who were using social media who, told us where people were being vulnerable and which areas were vulnerable. Plastic sheets, all these things, train children to send out signal. And if you look at the model of Bangladesh, they have become totally disaster proof. When they were a part of Pakistan, they were being hit by disaster again and again. And a lot of resources had to be spent, to save them. Now you don't hear of those things because they have climate proof their whole country. So it's not rocket science. It's not something that people from Mars can come and do for us. It's us. We know this can be done. We know this must be done. Next. Next. So all these, so now you're talking about disaster risk management. These are the things, once the disaster has struck. Earlier, I was talking about how to save it from striking us. But then these are the things one has to, work towards. You have to relocate the vulnerable population or the disaster hit population. You have to give them compensation. Then you have to get into reconstruction. So then which material is going to be used in reconstruction is a big question mark, because if you use the same kind of material where which cannot bear moisture standing at its foundations for a long time and it crumbles, so where are you going to rehabilitate there? What kind of material should be there? And other than the floods, we have to look at the rising heat. So what kind of material we are using that people living in those kind of housing are becoming more and more vulnerable. So cement obviously absorbs heat, it dissipates very slowly. We need to take a step back and look at the older ways because they were better than the modern ways that we suddenly fell in love with, because that's the aspiration when we look at the other world, the prosperous world. We have mud construction, we have forts standing for over 1,000 years. Our older houses, the big havelis, in very, very hot areas, be it southern Punjab, be it Sindh, be it the big houses of the Sardars in Balochistan, they are in sync with environment. They use the material that repels heat, that uses material that keeps them warm in the winters, and winters are very harsh. So we need to build back better, but with the indigenous knowledge, making indigenous knowledge better. We don't necessarily have to simply import and impose the solutions which will not work in the climate that we are used to. And then the equities you have, when we talk about climate justice in front of the rest of the world, let's take a look at how just we are within our own country and who is the beneficiary of the disbursement. If somebody has lost their documents, they don't exist. If somebody is not in the list of the ultra poor or the poor, and now they have become poor because they've lost everything in the floods, they don't exist anymore either. So a large population of people who will not be the beneficiaries of any kind of disbursement is not fair. They need crop insurance, they need housing insurance, they need soft loans, loans which are like we ask the rest of the world, because we keep begging our friends to give us soft loans on easy terms, meaning payable after many years, many years, not like the IFCs, but we ask our friendly countries and they give us loans which are on an easy term. So our farmers, they need at least 2 to 3 crop cycles to only be able to get their land ready for cultivation, because 6 months have passed, the water is still standing, at least in my province, and the soil quality has deteriorated. In the southern Punjab and parts of Balochistan where the hill torrents came, they have taken the top fertile layer of the soil away. So what will make those farmers stand up on their own feet? at least 2 to 3 crop cycles from which they can save and then pay back loans. But if they are given loans now and they are being, it's just a yearly cycle, they will never be able to get out of the crushing poverty. Next. So these are the, I know that I'm repeating this, but this is very, very important. Okay. Yeah, so all these, we need to take a complete relook at the way we do development. And as far as climate change adaptation is concerned, we do not have an adaptation plan for Pakistan just yet. We do have a climate change act. KP and Balochistan do not have the climate change policy either. So Sindh has completed its policies there on with the CM for signing it. I think Punjab also has it, but unless and until you put some things down in an order of priority, how do you start implementing them? So I think the provinces which do not have their policy need to work in tandem with somebody who's making an implementation mechanism as well as an adaptation plan at the lowest governance level. But because we are talking about DDMAs and NDMAs, etc., where are the DDMAs? Unless and until you have DDMAs and a local bodies system, functional local body system, a representative local body system, the people who are bearing the brunt will never be able to get the benefit that they deserve. So these are some of my recommendations. I know I've gone on a long time. I'll end here. So now my next, So thank you. Last slide.
Thank you, Ms. Afia, for your presentation. It was pleasure listening to you and to our other guest speakers, Ghulam Mohammad Arif. Now I would request to our next moderator, Mr. Lutfullah, to welcome our next guest speakers, which will be Ms. Maria Hassan. Over to you, Mr. Lutfullah.
Thank you, Ms. Shamsi. This is Lutfullah, student of Political Science and Population Studies, enrolled in bachelor's in FC College. Now we are moving forward to our second phase of panel discussion, where we will have experts from different provinces. Moving forward, I would like to invite our provincial guest speaker, Ms. Maria Hassan, nominated by Population Research Center, IBA, Karachi. Ms. Maria Hassan is an assistant professor, the academic director, Writing Center, research associate, PRC, IBA. Her formal training is in linguistics with a focus on sociolinguistics, sociology of language, and critical discourse analysis. She's a fellow of American Institute of Pakistan Studies and an alumni of IWCA Summer Institute 2018 and a doctoral candidate in trans languaging. She's also trained in language documentation. Ms. Hassan served as member editorial board of the Spelt Quarterly and associate editor Spelt ELT Research Journal, and has also served on curriculum review committee for Ziauddin University, Karachi. She has facilitated Population Council's annual conferences. She has published in academic journals and scholarly magazine in range of social science fields, has presented in academic conferences. Her published work on Karachi critically evaluates the demographic dynamics of city and its connection with regime of violence and terror with the city. Currently, she is working on a monograph on Layari, focusing on Pakistan dynamics and tracing socioeconomic plight of the residents. Her research interests include sociology, linguistic anthropology, policy, language documentation, and critical discourse analysis. Ms. Maria will talk on devastation by floods in Sindh, relief and rehabilitation activities in Sindh, and imminent challenges. Ms. Maria, I would request you to please proceed with your presentation. Over to you, please.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, Lutfullah Saab, for giving me this time and opportunity. So my worthy colleagues have been very thorough in terms of giving an overview of what the situation has been, how we have landed where we have landed, and what we should be prepared for. So for my brief presentation, I would start off with giving an overview of the situation of Sindh, especially in contrast with the rest of the provinces. But then I'd like to focus on the key areas that needs attention. And one of the key aspects of my presentation would be dividing that into areas that need specific attention in terms of an immediate attention, and then also what needs to be done in the longer term. Let's get started. So here, my first slide is just an attempt to showcase and show that how, whereas every other part of the country was affected by these devastating floods, how Sindh was worst hit, both in terms of loss, in terms of damage, in terms of need. So this is the data that I picked from the World Bank report. This damage is something that we see visible in all the possible aspects, whether it is in terms of number of districts affected or number of houses damaged, for that matter, livestock, deaths, displacement, and so on and so forth. So if we just move ahead and we see that the devastation as it moves, as can be seen, there are worst hit areas, not so worst areas, but overall, it's been a very, very unbelievably tough situation for Sindh and the people of Sindh. It probably would not be wrong to say that the number of cities in terms of a percentage and the there in Sindh were certainly, they outnumbered the rest of the provinces. Similarly, in terms of housing, what happened was that, if we again think of a totaling of partially damaged as well as fully damaged housings, so that is also again devastating, and this is something where Sindh again is in the worst possible shape. The same we see happening in terms of all the other indicators, be it total number of deaths or total affected population, or in terms of injuries. Although this is for us to note that whereas the numbers in terms of total death would be slightly different when it comes to the government data and DMA data, and then provincial district disaster management data, the ones coming from the independent sources such as this one that I picked from Al Khidmat Foundation, that shows that the hit was far worse than as it is shown in the government data. And that is probably one area for us to consider when we are thinking of how to manage this and how to deal with this and how to move ahead with this, that we have to have a numbers straight, because just misquoting numbers or just having a misrepresentation probably would not help us in any ways, rather it would backfire. For me, in addition to the damage of housing, what is the worst possible scenario is that of the crop area in acres that's been affected. And the damage, you can just the slide gives you a sense of how far the numbers are, if you're thinking of a comparison of what the actual area was as compared to the area damaged. And this takes us to this basic question that if the province has to be in a position to move ahead or to start moving ahead, there has to be something done immediately to the crop area, that is the agricultural land that way. And so here, this is an overview of an overall, damage situation as it's been there. It's been presented by various agencies and organizations, including World Bank, including UN, and our national agencies as well. So as I said, that I'd like to move ahead and focus on the relief and rehab part of it. And would like to focus on how, while we are rethinking of the entire relief rehab, what needs to be done and who are supposed to be the key stakeholders, and how and when and in what manner they can give their input and they can contribute in their way. So, according to my humble suggestion, the key contributors in any sort of relief and rehab work would include the government, international bodies, the local NGOs, and donors, okay, in every sort, whether cash or kind. Here in this particular situation, as has been mentioned by the earlier speaker as well, and was hinted elsewhere also, that when it comes to the very question of damage control and response to disaster, the response to disaster in this situation of the government bodies, of the responsible departments, that was very late. And it is argued, and I think it's pretty well argued, that probably the devastation could have been improved. So the situation could have been an improved situation just a bit. It could have been a slightly less disastrous had the response of the designated departments and government bodies would have been in place, and if they would have been proactive, or even if they were not proactive, they could have just started tackling this as early as possible, which unfortunately didn't happen and had definitely added to the calamity in ways imaginable and ways unimaginable, of course. So in this particular situation, whatever the NGOs have done, and I'm particularly pointing out local NGOs. So I would not mind naming a few, because with some of them, many of us have worked in various capacities. So NGOs such as Al Khidmat Foundation, NGOs such as FRCR, and then JDC, specifically in Sindh, their work has been phenomenal. And the way they mobilize the communities for donation collection and for funds collection, and then the way all of this was dispersed, that was really commendable. And we definitely wish and hope that the similar could have been an approach that the government organizations could have taken into consideration. Here, in terms of relief and rehab, we again, as ever, as it was the case in 2010 and then later, international bodies have come all the way. They have helped us as ever. And unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, yes, but even in this situation, most likely it will be impossible, next to impossible, for the government of Pakistan to be able to do something successfully without the help of international bodies. So that is again a point of consideration for us, that what kind of engagement, what kind of networking, and the most of all, very important, the kind of confidence building that we need to have and we need to develop, so that they come forward, they help us not only in terms of helping with monetary relief, but also in terms of infrastructure development and planning, contingency planning, long-term risk management, in whichever way possible. I would like to rather argue that it's high time that the government should consider, both at the provincial and the federal level, that if we are seeking help from international stakeholders, we should rather use such help, or we should rather seek help in our own capacity building in whichever way possible, rather than just focusing on relying on, be happy with the monetary help that comes to us in such situations. And then, of course, donors, I would rather skip that, because that's something pretty explanatory, that if we need to start not really from scratch, but somewhere very close to that, we would need funds. And okay, for that, probably we'll have to search, negotiate, network in whichever way possible, so that not only from within the country, which of course would not be very sustainable way of starting off with, but also of course from elsewhere in the world. These donors would definitely be very, very important stakeholders when it comes to the overall scheme of relief and rehab. So now I'd like to just focus on what needs to be done moving ahead. One of the my here focus would be policy and implementation, and I would have a set of pointers that I would like to then elaborate upon. So when we say that of all the flood affected areas within the country, Sindh was worst hit, one of the points we need to understand that probably somewhere the state of infrastructure in the province had to be blamed. And that is what should be a key consideration for anyone who's looking into and aspiring to work in this direction. So I've just tried to have a kind of subcategorization. So in terms of what should be the key considerations for policymakers and the implementational organizations, whether it is at the level of bureaucracy or at the district level. So I'd like to first start off with what needs to be done, what needs to be considered for long-term improvement in the situation. And according to my humble opinion, like one of the very first considerations should be capacity building. There are a number of areas where we need to work in terms of capacity building, starting with the forecasting, and then using that forecasting not only for the relevant on-field stakeholders, but also in terms of those who are involved in R&D. And this is where I'm referring to the researchers, the labs, and maybe other organizations, NGOs and think tanks who are involved in some sort of research in whatever capacity, highly academic or not so highly academic. And that work of theirs could bring a lot, could bring the kind of knowledge and understanding which is localized with sensibility that is going to be very useful if utilized properly and if implemented. So capacity building in that area, and also then capacity building in terms of field forces of disaster management. So in terms of the ability of dealing with such as disasters, so reserve forces probably are a must. And here, at least as of what is known publicly, there wasn't any such provision. So training, of course, at various levels, but also having those teams who will just go in field. So this could be something that can be considered. Then I think one major area for consideration should be how the funds are managed. Not that donations don't come to us, but then what happens with that? And what happens when supposedly all of this donation has been utilized? So when it comes to funds management, my argument would be that there has to be a very robust system that looks at and that monitors every aspect of the funds, not only acquisition but also allocation and then accountability, and which is like auditing of those funds, so that probably next time when such a situation hits us, we would not be just harping on the same thing that last time this happened, there were loads of funds, but then there was a lot of mismanagement of funds and so on and so forth. Then the third point in this connection is that we, and here when I say we, I am specifically referring to Sindh, that the province definitely need to rethink its infrastructure. There's a dire need for infrastructure overhaul. Okay, and that would actually mean that there are areas and there are aspects that are probably dated. And it's just thinking of modification would not really be a good idea. So that is where probably the government will have to consider that how all of this can be rethought and could be reconsidered. So whether it will be worth it to invest any further energy or resources, financial or otherwise, in improving upon what is there, or probably this is high time that needs to be just redesigned. Then structural modifications at a different level in terms of housing. And if I recall correctly, one of the previous speakers did mention that, like, what has happened in terms of housing over the years, how the building materials have changed, and how that has impacted or have had an impact on whatever has happened. So how that is done, and this is in addition to provision of housing, that where housing can be allowed, where housing should be allowed. Is it just okay to allow a society, a housing society anywhere, wherever there's an investor who has money and would like to have a housing society? Or would there be any grand considerations from the state, from the government, that what would be the environmental cost of it, and whether it will be feasible for the government to allow such a situation, such a option. Then agricultural management, not only in terms of considering what needs to be done for the laws that's already there in place, but also in terms of what ways could be adopted that could help us getting the most of the agricultural land, or the provisions that we have. And then of course water management, right? Dams sound very fancy, but is it really worth it that we spend the amount of money we do in dams? What about canals? Okay, how they can be helpful? Many of you, of course, would know of the Thare system in Balochistan. So of what I know, this is also in bad shape. And so I just mentioned that just to indicate that how they've been indigenous solutions, like solutions that are very close to whatever the infrastructure was, and how we gradually just discarded them. The point to consider is that whether it was really worth it or not, and then like how we, as we can introduce and incorporate newer and better ways, learning from the rest of the world, but also how we can go back to the basics and see if there was something really good in our systems, and we can reintroduce them. The similar is my point, here specifically with reference to coastal management. So I hail from, I'm a Karachiite. So if you just think of one very simple thing, whatever has happened to mangroves and mangrove forest in Karachi, that could be one point for many of us to just sit back and think that why Karachi is considered to be one of the most fragile places in the country, one of the most vulnerable cities in the country when it comes to a tsunami, let's say, if it ever comes. And why has that happened? Where are mangroves going? Where have they gone? And how it would affect us in the longer run. So this theory that by 2050, something really seriously wrong would happen to Karachi. Karachi would probably be sinking, or would have already sank by then. And then last point, again, in terms of long term, that reforestation, not just mangroves, but in general, reforesting is something that we'll have to consider in terms of combating carbon footprints, but also considering that how it can help us with, soil erosions, and how that in turn could have some, safety net when it comes to situations such as flooding. Okay, now I'll quickly move to the next slide. That is where I'm trying to consider the short-term possibilities, right? So, like here in Sindh, I believe we certainly need to have a very, efficient emergency response setup, right? That could then definitely lead to that would help us reduce risk. Okay, because yes, floods now, I think of past for now 2022 floods have taken place, but whatever is happening as a result of that, there's a lot that needs to be done there. Safe relocation, that is something that the government of Sindh, NDMA, provincial disaster management, all of them have to consider. People just cannot continue to live in such conditions with all the threats, just around them all the time. And then, of course, health management. So whatever has happened, whatever health hazards they're facing, how that needs to be dealt with, whichever way possible, whether it is in terms of camps or in terms of like some other rapid response services, but that has to be considered. And then moving on, not only that rehab would be a social economic rehab would also be a long-term goal, but it's definitely one of the short-term considerations, like specifically with reference to those who have lost their jobs, who've lost their employments, not only in the agri sector, but also elsewhere. And then whatever social costs they're bearing of that. And I just wanted to add to the point that how especially women are suffering in such situations, in camps, what kind of risk, additional risk that now they are facing, and what can be done. Something has to be done to combat that, right? And then the last point, sorry, condolence money, that is whatever way some monetary provisions could be considered, okay, whether it is through Benazir income support or a revised and improved version of it, or some other option, but that's certainly needed. And I think I need to be quick. Sorry, this is, so here I just would like to sum it up. When it comes to short term, like I also wanted to focus on what needs to be done immediately, immediate action. So provision of food, right? What government can do is can work in terms of enabling and facilitating donors and NGOs in whatever good work that they're doing, they're trying to do, in addition to what the government is doing itself. Because what we hear from field is not a very rosy picture all the time, especially for those who are trying to help. Then for health, rapid response mechanism in field hospitals, epidemic management, these are the things that the government needs to consider immediately. For housing, temporary housing, and tents maybe, but then sustainable housing initiative, that's probably high time it should be taken. Rethinking agriculture, I mentioned that earlier as well, that this is specifically in terms of how we do agriculture practices, water management for agriculture, crop management, everything, okay, probably can be revisited. Okay, and sorry, I've just made a typo. And the same is, my submission for agriculture, that the first point is damage control, and then we have to move on to that restoration of agricultural land, so that the economic rehab can also be initiated as early as possible. So that's that from my side. Thank you very much, all of you, for patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maria Hassan, for this thorough presentation. Now I would like to hand over the session to Ms. Shanze Ahmed for remaining presentations. Over to you, Ms. Shanze.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shanze Ahmed, and I am a student assistant of the PRC at CCU. I would like to first invite our next guest speaker for today's event, Mr. Mumtaz Ali, District Support Manager, PPHI District Mission, nominated by PRC, Balochistan University of Information Technology, Engineering and Management Sciences. Mr. Mumtaz Ali started his career from language and computers teaching in an institute from 2001, joined the development sector, Balochistan Rural Support Program as assistant in 2003, in District Mustam, transferred to head office PRSP as microfinance officer in 2004 and remained there till August 2006. Switched to PPHI as monitoring and admin officer in August 2006. Served in different districts on monitoring and evaluation officer, namely Quetta, Mustam, Karachi, and Sibbi. Joined the PPHI head office in 2012 to 2018. During this period, served as manager HR, MER, and admin. Mr. Mumtaz presented his organization with other international and national organizations, provided support for developing the manual of operations, proposals, project designing, and organizational developments. In 2018, transferred to District Jafarabad as District Support Manager with task of establishment of newly District Subitpur. After completion of task, he joined District Kila Abdullah with pilot project of the UNFPA and currently serving at District Mission with leading IRC project. Some of his major achievements are timely response during the flood to the Nasrabad division in 2010 through PPHI, new health interventions and initiatives, that is labs and telemedicine at primary health level, linkages development and health education at community level, establishment of District Subitpur, successful completion of health pilot project at District Kila Abdullah, provision of support to the 1,200 patients of leishmaniasis in District Kila Abdullah, response and support in different natural disasters to the concerned districts. Mr. Mumtaz Ali will now talk on devastation by floods in Balochistan, relief and rehabilitation activities in Balochistan, and imminent challenges. Mr. Mumtaz, I would like you to please proceed with your presentation.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. And thank you very much to PRC, FCCU, and the Population Research Council, and especially to Dr. Zubair from BUITEMS. They have given me a chance to speak. This is my presentation. Actually, I think all our participants, they have spoke a lot and they have given many figures. Just I will try to come on some important points which might be not discussed or which are very important to be discussed. Actually, I have been in Sobitpur, Jafarabad in 2010 when there was a flood, and I with my team, we have paid response, and I was on the ground in actually. And after that, mostly in disasters, I have tried my level best to make some proposals and work for the vulnerable communities. And recently, in recent flood which occurred in July, after that in August, there was a flood in some districts of Balochistan, and definitely throughout Pakistan there were. So I have to go through a presentation, and then we will discuss some important points. Actually, I was in the ground, so I may be able to brief about the actual ground realities and what happened and what was to be done and what we have to do in the next. Actually, first, when I see the first flood in 2008, and again now we are in 22, but still we have the same situations and more difficulties as per 2008. So I thought we may learn after the disasters and other problems, but I don't think we have learned such a kind of thing. So this is the recent flood affected in Balochistan. This is already discussed, and we have such a kind of data on web, and secondly, we can get from many other resources. So this is not, I think, very much important, as you know that flood is a number of one severe weather killer, or it has a light damage in current monsoon spell in first week of week of July 2002 and in August, ended in August. It has caused widespread flood, and it has to expensive human and infrastructure damages across many parts of Pakistan. So these are the figures, and these are the things which are already discussed. And just I have to put some glance on some important things. As a being of employee of the People's Primary Healthcare Initiative, I'm mostly related with the health sector. So first of all, that we have not discussed what we have done during the floods. These are some figures which are important to share with you people, that what we did during the flood from July to till date. Total, we had some 708 camps in Balochistan, and 180,000 people we have served during this flood. The figures are in front of you. And after that, in Pashim, Kilabla, and Chaman, where we had that foreign refugees also, and we have scattered population, and these districts were also damaged during first flood in July. So these are some figures we have supported the peoples during the flood. So these are some questions what I want to put in front of all of you. What we did after the last disasters. This is a thing we have to think over it, like what disasters, like I told that in 2008, and many times we have faced many disasters, but what we did after that, and what new happened, means after that what new happened. And one thing is that we do not have the proper information, and second, what to done, and this we don't know what to done, and what we did. This is the question. And did we support what they needed? Actually, we go on plannings which we make from our main head offices, but we don't know, we do not have such a kind of baseline surveys, and we do not have such a kind of resources to know what people they need in actually, and what remain undone, and many things that people they need at the time of disaster, after disaster, that we don't know about that thing, and what was required, and what we learned. Actually, the disaster comes, and after that, what we learned and what we have to do to stop such a kind of disasters in the futures. And there are many things which we can do like by ourselves, and to reduce the risk of the losses. And what is our future sustainability plan, and what is our sustainability plan, what to do. And secondly, there are many things which I have noticed after the disaster. The first main thing is the psychological support, which people need a lot. Actually, we do not have like many organizations, they give their inputs during the disaster or after disaster, but mostly we miss the psychological support in our programs. And after that, that emergency health support. And initially they need people, they need emergency health support, and they do not get such a kind of support, and which make the losses of life and many other damages. And secondly, Balochistan is already, we are living in a very deplorable conditions. If you leave the Quetta, the other mostly districts are peoples are in vulnerable conditions, and especially the females and children's, they are most vulnerable, and they do not have access of anything. Mostly they do not have access of health, they do not have access of education, they do not have access of their rights. So mostly even before these disasters or in a normal conditions, they are in mostly vulnerable condition. As you know, the MMR rate of the Balochistan and IMR rate of the Balochistan. So this is the main questions, like what we are doing for the mother and child health. Even in most of the districts of the Balochistan, they do not have proper labor rooms, they do not have a proper hospitalization, hospitals. But in disasters, they mostly suffer, the vulnerable people, they suffer a lot. And secondly, the family planning, if this was discussed before, as there are clients and there are many people, they want to avail such a kind of facilities, but we do not have such a kind of resources to provide them such a kind of things. And the nutrition is also very important thing, that during the disaster, before disaster, already we have many problems in nutrition, and many our nutrition status of Balochistan is very worse at the moment. So question is that by having before disaster or even in a normal conditions, Balochistan people, the population of the Balochistan is living in such a condition, in emergency condition, when after disasters, they become more vulnerable and more effective. And it is very important to take such a kind of policies, and we should make such a kind of policies to reach to the vulnerable people. Actually, this was already discussed that the main, we get a lot of resources after flood or during the flood in emergencies, but how we are using these resources, and are we getting to the vulnerable peoples or not? If we are getting, how we are getting them, and what we are providing them, and how we are making them sustainable. So the thing is that we work on the things immediately, but we do not think about the sustainability plans. We do not make the future plan to overcome in such a situations and to reduce the risk of such a conditions. Even I have seen in Balochistan on the ground, people, mostly the things which facilities we provide to the community, these gets politicized. These things goes to the people who have good connections with the government or other departments. So this makes problem for the vulnerable people, and we cannot reach to them, and again they get more vulnerable, and this brings a question mark and make a challenge for us in the future. So we have to reduce, and we have to make a plan. And secondly, when we are going to make a plan, we should consider those people, what they need and what are their actual needs, and what can make them more sustainable in the future. So these are the some important points which I wanted to discuss with our colleagues. And some pictures, I think these are not important, just what we did, those pictures I shared with you. So any questions about these, or if you someone want to discuss about these questions, so this will be a good debate, I think, if we discuss on some questions, if someone have any question about it.
So we will have the question Q&A at the end of the session. Participants are requested to leave their questions in the chat box or to raise their hand. So we have a question to Ms. Afia and Sir Arif. How do people with less resources can cope with such severities as good governance countries even have bad experiences with the floods? Ms. Afia or Sir Arif, could we have a question directed to you? Any other questions?
So I'm just going to repeat the question, and the panelists that are still here can please respond to the answer. The question is how people with less resources can cope with severities as good governance countries even have bad experience with floods. Ms. Afia, if you can hear us, could you please take this question? I think Ms. Afia cannot hear us. Are there any other questions for any of the panelists? I think we've gone overboard in terms of time, and some of our panelists have already left. And I think it would be a good time to conclude this session. I would like to thank all our worthy guests who were here and who listened to all our presentation for 2.5 hours. I'd like to thank very much our worthy presenters who shared this unique information with us, and I hope that this information leads to new research and new policy dialogues. I would specifically like to thank our Dr. John Edelton, Dr. Zeba Sattar, and Dr. G.M. Arif, Ms. Afia, for their initial remarks. With this, I would like to inform all of you that a video of these proceedings will be available on YouTube. I thank you all for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you on our next session. Thank you very much.